Let's talk about the civil service now. I'm delighted to be joined by Alun Evans, who is a former senior civil servant, now a political historian, and he's here to share his new book, The Intimacy of Power, which I'll just put up there so you can have a good look. Alun, come on, let's get into what Liz Truss accused the civil service of, which was having too much power. She said that the blob had taken over. In fact, I remember having this conversation with her in person. She said the trouble is with being Prime Minister is that you pull on a lever and the civil service pulls in the opposite direction and you can't ever get anything done. Is that a fair analysis or not?
I think it's totally unfair.
Is it?
Having worked in Number 10, having worked in many departments, the ministers who know what they want, and you've got Michael Portillo on shortly, who
he knew what he wanted as
minister.
Defence Secretary.
The ministers know what they want, will set down their views, set out their vision, work courteously with their civil servants. And I find, in my experience, that ministers who criticise the civil service without a justification is normally because they can't either articulate their views or, for whatever reasons, are not powerful enough to win the argument.
Well, let's give the counter-narrative to that, because we had a couple of ministers, Priti Patel and Dominic Raab, accused of being too robust in expressing a view, that they were getting frustrated with their civil servants. They expressed their frustrations and then they were sort of accused of bullying. So can there also be just a disconnect between ministers wanting to carry out quite a radical agenda and civil servants saying, no, you can't?
I haven't seen that happening. I mean, there's no cause for bullying, harassment by ministers or civil servants. Of course, that's out. But as I say, I repeat what I say, a minister who knows exactly what he or she wants is much more popular with civil servants than one who doesn't. And that's not a political statement. If the minister comes in and says, this is what I want to achieve, tell me the pros and cons of different ways of doing it, that goes down far better with the civil service than a minister who comes in and says, well, I'm not quite sure, what do you think I should do? And
yes.
The best ministers are the ones who give clear guidance, who are courteous with their civil service and know exactly where they want to go.
But have we historically had civil servants and Tory ministers rubbing each other up the wrong way? Because despite all attempts to be impartial, that the civil service is largely left-leaning and so doesn't necessarily agree with the agenda that any government on the right is asking them to carry out.
Well, again, I don't really believe that. If you look at my book, the section on Margaret Thatcher was extremely dominant in what she wanted to achieve. She had in her private office at Number 10 people like Charles Pole and Bernard Ingham, who were very robust in defending her argument, in making sure the rest of Whitehall understood what she wanted to do, and her agenda was delivered. Now, that doesn't seem to me like the civil service taking control of policy, as far as I can see.
Although when we look back to the referendum campaign and the aftermath of Brexit, we know, for instance, that the Foreign Office and the mandarins there were disgusted by this result.
Well, I agree with that, and
so they're not impartial then?
No, and I suspect that the head of the Foreign Office, who made a comment on the way in which he voted in the referendum, probably regrets rather doing that.
That was Lord MacDonald, who was then the head of the FCO.
Yeah.
He disclosed to colleagues that he voted Remain in the Brexit referendum.
Yeah.
Doesn't that blow all claim of impartiality out of the window? In fact, how can anyone be truly impartial? I know there's this aim for civil servants to act in absolute neutrality. Surely it's impossible, if you're that angry about Brexit, not to let that infect your work.
Well, if you're really so angry about a policy you can't go along with it, you resign from the civil service. But I think on the whole, you've pulled up one example, which is fine, but on the whole, civil servants are loyal, trustworthy. They want to articulate the government of the day. And if there's a change of government after the next general election, I guarantee that civil servants in all departments will be up for change. They will be keen to implement their new minister's wishes. And partly they want to show that the civil service is capable of change, capable of doing things differently and capable of working for a different government.
Is the civil service capable of being reduced in size? The Tory manifesto has suggested that the numbers should go back to pre-pandemic levels. In a general sense, Alun, has the civil service got too wide and unwieldy?
It's got wide and unwieldy. The numbers have definitely gone up as a result of the
Tell me the
pandemic.
numbers approximately.
Well, the numbers were approximately 400,000 if you go back to pre-pandemic days, and I think I haven't looked them up, they're around 600,000. So it's an enormous...
That's a lot more, isn't it?
Don't quote me on that.
No, all right, but approximately. So they've gone up maybe by 200,000.
Yeah.
That's too many, isn't it?
It's a large number. I don't know what numbers you need. What is important, it seems to me, is come the general election, let's assume for the sake of argument, as the polls say, that Starmer wins, he will come in and have his missions and stuff like that. He will then need to make a decision on how many people in each department they need to deliver this. Now, I take your point that there is a good thing in trying to reduce the number of civil servants to the number necessary, but it's very difficult to say what that number should be.
How many civil servants were there under Thatcher?
I don't know.
OK, but I think it must have been far less than 400,000.
I suspect it was about the same number, but you asked me questions I didn't even know about beforehand, so I probably looked up some statistics beforehand.
Alan, I should have looked them up, so don't worry about that.
Yeah.
So the size we think has got bigger, but then back to that impartiality thing, you just reminded me of it because you mentioned Keir Starmer. Yeah. There is a problem arguing impartiality when somebody like Sue Gray, who was a career civil servant, then ends up being Chief of Staff for the Labour leader. That then suggests that all along she's harboured these left-wing tendencies that may or may not have informed her work.
Well, I don't know the inner workings of Sue Gray's mind, and that wasn't also something I didn't think you'd talk about. Let me just make a slightly different point, if I may, which is if Starmer wins on the 4th of July, on the Friday the 5th of July, Saturday the 6th of July and Sunday the 7th of July, he will appoint around 100 plus ministers. The vast majority of those ministers will have no experience whatsoever of government. They'll have done precious little training. He has never been a minister. The vast majority have not been a minister. And what the new ministers at whatever level will do when they come into office will turn to the civil service to look for advice. They'll turn in the first instance to the private office, which is what my book is about. And coming back to your original question, Camilla, the civil servants in the private office will like best a minister who says, this is what I want to achieve. These are my strategic objectives. Now tell me how best I can achieve them. This is what I think. Will that work, or do we need to tweak it at all? And as part of that discussion, to pick up your other point, they may say, have we got the right number of civil servants, or could we lose some here or there, or could we move them around elsewhere? And that is why the handover is going to be so interesting to see how it goes.
Brilliant. Alun Evans, this is your book, The Intimacy of Power. There we have it. Do get it if you want to get all of the insider scoop, basically, on the inner workings of Whitehall. I will be back